Have you ever gone inside a store and struggled to find your way out? The thought of getting lost makes us think of a cave, an unfamiliar path in the woods, or a maze designed specifically for that purpose. Yet a lot of us have undoubtedly found ourselves lost inside of an IKEA. In 1952, Dayton Company commissioned Victor Gruen to build the first indoor, climate-controlled shopping mall in Minnesota. This mall would become the clearest display and inspiration of all future stores that would employ the Gruen effect. The purposeful disorientation, overwhelming, and distraction of customers, which has been scientifically proven to cause customers to spend longer and thus buy more of what is available in stores. When something sells, it's because someone wants to buy it, or at least that's how it's supposed to be. Unfortunately, every single person is prone to manipulation, even if it's to different extents. And there are a million different ways in which we as customers are coerced and influenced into buying things that we might have otherwise not gotten. The small but significant psychological tricks that stores, online websites, and marketplaces play on us are called nudge tricks, and every aspect of our perception, such as our vision, hearing, taste, smell, and even touch, becomes weaponized in order to sell more in every way possible. One of, if not the most common appearances of this, are the 99-cent pricing, which consists of just setting your price at, for example, $19.99 instead of $20. Although it might not seem like a 1 cent difference would be enough to sway a customer, the reality is that we psychologically interpret and prioritize the first number we see. Even if the price is as close to $20 as it gets, we're going to take into account the 1 from the beginning, which is a low number, and then the 9, leaving little regard for the cents. This sort of perceptive distortion is also used in other ways, such as breaking up the total price under monthly installments to make the price seem more affordable, or something as seemingly meaningless as making the price of the product end with an odd number to create the perception of savings and getting a good deal, known in the marketing world as odd-even pricing. Alright, but what about sales? In theory, a sale is no more than a reduction of prices, but in reality, the very existence of a sale is already manipulative. Sales can be and mean quite literally anything. There can be products that are eternally on sale, always discounted at a 50% off, as the sellers never actually intended to sell the product without the sale. There can be stores that claim that they're going out of business and having everything at a discount, even though the business isn't actually going anywhere. By that same token, anything that can be done to manipulate your perception of the discount can and will be done. Sales will often try to produce false senses of urgency, saying things like only 100 items left or sale ends in 2 hours, and will do what is often called phasing discounts, in which the best discounts have already happened, but there are still quote-unquote good deals to be had. This false sense of urgency causes many who weren't planning or even considering purchasing to give it a second thought, thinking, well, maybe I should get it since it's such a great deal. And the phasing discount will make people want to buy now instead of later to maximize their deal. It's all part of a system designed to hook and reel in customers, and we, as its victims, are susceptible to it by almost all of our senses. Visually, items with red tags are usually purchased with more frequency due to the perception of a sale that the color produces. Men are especially susceptible to this, just as, according to studies, both men and women are more likely to buy whatever the seller wants to sell if the salesperson is a woman who makes physical contact with them in any way, be it a handshake, a tap on the shoulder, etc. If you're in a grocery store or buying somewhere where there are no employees actively attempting to sell, you might be safe from this, but you are still susceptible to a plethora of influences, notably music. According to a study done by the Journal of Retailing, the rhythm of the music, the tempo, the genre, and even what style of music impacts everything from your shopping, what you buy, and what you prefer. With a slow tempo and more relaxed music, convenience and grocery stores found that customers spent longer periods of time inside their store, and thus ended up buying more than what they initially had intended to buy. In restaurants, a faster tempo and a generally louder and messier sound has been seen to speed up the eating times of customers, allowing the establishment to open up seats and serve more people in less time. On top of this, restaurants tend to exploit their customers a little extra by making use of our ability to form arbitrary coherence, which basically just means that we make things seem more reasonable or coherent based on the context and not based on any objective or external norm. In practice, this is seen when food menus sell certain quote-unquote luxury dishes at ridiculously high prices, which shock the customer and at the same time make the rest of the items, even if they are generally overpriced, seem much more reasonable and therefore more likely to be purchased. Similarly, companies use what is called as decoy pricing to quote-unquote upgrade the amount of money that you spend. Decoy prices are most easily seen using the example of popcorn sizes in movie theaters, where we have a small, medium, and large size. Logically, the price of each of the sizes would be proportional to the volume of popcorn they hold, but as we can see in real life, that isn't the case. What will happen instead is that the small size will have a price, let's say $4, but then there will be a radical jump in price from the small to the medium, like $4 to $8, but a marginal price between the medium and the large, for example $8 to $8.50. Companies know that the people who want a small bin of popcorn and those who want a large will buy those sizes no matter what. So what they do is they capitalize on those who sit in the middle, wanting more than a small but not sure if they're willing to get a large. With this decoy pricing, companies make us perceive the big price jump from small to medium as a bad deal, while the marginal difference in prices between the medium and the large becomes a great deal, thus driving sales to the large and more expensive popcorn size. Although minor, these tricks can have major consequences not only for the customer, but for competing businesses. In 2009, Garris Kemp and Travis Kalanick spent $800 on a private driver on New Year's Eve. Seeing these staggering prices, combined with the shortage of drivers in places that were either too populated or not sufficiently populated, they designed and founded Uber. Taxi companies all over the world have had to decrease salaries by a staggering 10%, with one of the major reasons for Uber's dominance being something so seemingly insignificant: fixed pricing. Although Uber and UberX rides could be as expensive or even more so than a standard taxi, the fact that customers had to anxiously watch during the ride as the taxi meter's price steadily rose with each kilometer, while Uber offered a fixed, upfront, and unchanging price, was enough to consciously or subconsciously sway many customers to Uber. When comparing and deciding between which carton of eggs to get, we will first pay attention to what's important: the price, the number of eggs, if the eggs are broken, etc. But if we're left to choose between different cartons of eggs after what is the first inspection, we will turn to packaging, labels, colors, tags, keywords, and whatever else you can think about and name about how an item in a store is presented to you has been carefully thought out, selected, and researched, all for the same purpose that we've been talking about this entire video: more sales. Of course, we have the important keywords such as gluten-free, no lactose, made without peanuts, but by that same token, we're also swayed by labels that might appear to be on the same level of importance as those aforementioned, while in reality meaning little to nothing. The first label I'd like to draw attention to is anything branded as anti-inflammatory. Certain foods increase blood sugar and precipitate the release of molecules associated with inflammation. Words such as inflammation and blood sugar we associate generally to be bad, since we don't really know what they imply, but in reality, these rises of blood sugar and inflammation are generally just serving the purpose of maintaining homeostasis, a fancy word to describe the balance at which our body functions. While certain foods that might cause inflammation can be bad for you, they're not bad for you because of the inflammation, they're bad in spite of it. It's a case of correlation and not causation. In that same fashion, food that claims to have a low glycemic index shouldn't be considered as beneficial at face value. Apart from the fact that blood sugar is needed at certain levels in order for our body to maintain homeostasis, the fact that unhealthy foods like pound cake and soda have a low glycemic index should tell you all you need to know about this label. It doesn't mean anything, in the same way that saying your product is clean doesn't mean anything. All food packaged and sold in stores has to legally pass a health and safety check. When the food label says clean, all it is doing is making itself stand out from the food that doesn't have that label, as if those were dirty. Labels such as clean, food to improve your gut health, or food that quote-unquote may reduce risk of whatever have zero real meaning to them. Although making false claims on your product is illegal, the use of vague, roundabout, and uncompromising language serves as a very manipulative legal workaround, and companies are allowed to label their products with this possibly misleading information. An easy and common way to be misled by these labels is when people end up buying something that they thought was what they wanted to buy. When looking for high grain and fiber content in bread, for example, customers look for the word grain more than anything. Knowing this, companies label their bread as multigrain, which in combination with their similar appearance, causes customers to buy a product with a much lower source of protein than what they had intended to buy, that being whole grain. Again, this happens with keywords like fat. When looking for something to eat that won't make you put on the pounds, seeing a product labeled as fat-free at the store might lead you to assume that that product has no fat in it, an assumption in which you would be correct. The specific product has no fat in it, but what isn't the next logical step is realizing that you will still gain fat from the product. Low-fat or non-fat foods have their fat removed during processing, but these fats are replaced with conservatives, sugars, carbs, and whatever else is needed to preserve the food and serve the function that the fat did. The fat in foods is not the sole quality that will make you fat, but the sugars and carbs that are noticeably present in greater quantities in these low-fat foods most likely will. Lastly, and what is, to me, the greatest offense when discussing labels, is quote-unquote free-range branding. Although thinking of free-range eggs makes us think of happy little chickens roaming in the wild, the reality is that the legal definition of free-range is, quote, a meat or poultry product, including eggs, that comes from an animal that was raised in the open air or was free to roam, end quote. Noticeably lacking in this definition is a requirement of space, meaning that free-range eggs could be quote-unquote roaming in the smallest spaces you can think of, in conditions not any less packed than what you would consider regular farming. Free-range, as it's defined, can only be considered free when comparing it to factory farming, but even these two methods will have more in common than one might think. With the invention of the internet and its powerful tool of targeted ads, the scope of psychological profiling has transcended the limitations of general use seen in the earlier tricks I've discussed. It's an era where individuality is meticulously analyzed to influence our decisions. While physical stores may not have reached this level of personalization yet, we must not remain complacent. Take a moment to contemplate how your hard-earned money is being siphoned away from you. Because in this world of tailored persuasion, with 99 cents, you're getting robbed.